Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the I Do Music podcast, and our goal and our mission is to empower and educate musicians and artists worldwide. And on today's episode, we're talking to Ric Ross at Capitol Records, discussing his passion for music over 30 years, servicing records in the beginning of his career to pushing records for today's hottest artists, and his love for his nonprofit with MEG. Hey, it's Sammy for another episode of the I Do Music podcast, and I'm sitting here with Ric Ross of Capitol Records, the Southeast National Field Director. That's right?
That's right.
Got it right this time.
Got it right.
How you doing this morning?
I'm good.
Good to have you. Now, let's not be confused with rapper Ric Ross or the legendary drug dealer Ric Ross.
Nope.
Ric Ross is your actual name.
That's my name.
I don't think that's either of their names, for real. But has it been cool to share a name with people like the rapper Ric Ross or the drug dealer, infamous and most famous people? Have you ever taken advantage of that?
I'm the original Ric Ross. I mean, that's what it is.
Right.
You know.
So you're like, nah, they might have taken advantage of your name, huh?
Hey, it is what it is.
So you serve as the Southeast National Field Director, which we just said, at Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what that means exactly, like specifically to our listeners who don't have any idea what that means.
In short, what I do every day, I get records played.
Okay.
Bottom line.
Awesome.
You know, so I work Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, South Carolina, and plus wherever else I'm needed in the country, I go. And my job every day is to call radio stations and fight to get my records played.
Awesome.
That's what we do.
That's just a different name for it. I feel like I never heard of it.
We're on the front line of everything. It starts with us.
So how did you? I know you began your career at Warner
Electric at Electric. Yeah. Electra,
excuse me. So how could you say you began your career there? What was it that you were doing to kind of bring you into what you're doing now? Is it similar to the same thing in terms of marketing and promotion?
Well, first of all, I've always had a love for music. I've been, from the time I can remember, playing in bands.
You were in a band?
I was in a band. I played guitar. I played percussion. I played trumpet. So I've always been a music lover. Mm-hmm. So I always knew that I wanted to be in the entertainment industry. Dope. But when I heard Eddie Van Halen and Jimi Hendrix playing guitar, I was like, I'm not going to be that. So let me put that down. And then I focused more on the business side of the industry. Is
that when you decided to go to school for the Music Business Institute?
Yeah.
Yes.
It was a school back in the 80s. It was only a 9-month course.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was taught by industry professionals, whether you wanted to learn recording, engineering, movie, film production, concert promotion. So there were various classes that they taught by actual industry professionals that did it every day. Unfortunately, the school didn't last because these were not certified teachers.
Right.
So they eventually shut the school down, but I know a lot of people that graduated from that school. Dope. And that entered the music industry.
So what was your focus while you were there?
Everything. But I went because I wanted to be an engineer.
Oh wow!
So we had a competition between the classes where we had to come up with the best mix. Mm-hmm. So we went in the studio. Chester Sound was the studio that we went into off of Cheshire Bridge. It was a legendary studio back in the 70s and the 80s, and we went in there and we put together an entire project. Oh. So I played drums on the project, and I had to actually mix the project, and I had the best mix out of all the classes. So
look at you.
But I found out later that I couldn't sit in the studio for hours and hours and do that. So
that just wasn't your thing.
It wasn't my thing. I loved it. I loved the process, but I couldn't. It was like, no, I got to find something else to do. This is too long. But if I wouldn't have went to that school and went through that, then I wouldn't have known what the process was of being an engineer and being in the studio and, being a studio rat. So,
right.
So my love from that went to record promotions. Mm-hmm. So my class was taught by actually a lady that I ended up working with at Warner Brothers. And this class, believe it or not, I failed because I was working at night. So I would leave work and then go to school without any sleep.
Mm.
And it turned out that this would be my career.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So a lot of young people in like high school going into college, I feel like don't or are kind of unsure of what they want to do. And it seems like, unlike yourself, you seem to have had like at least an inkling of what it is that you wanted to do within music. Why was it important for you to find your purpose within your career choice?
Well, it was always my passion. Now, my purpose didn't come till later on.
Okay.
But my passion was always music. So that's what I loved. That's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
So, once I got my foot in the door, I just learned everything that I could learn about the business.
Right.
So I started on the distribution side. So I actually worked in a warehouse.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So my first job was packing CDs. Let me back. Before the CDs, we were still doing vinyl.
Mm-hmm.
45, 7 inches, and cassettes and albums. CDs didn't come along till like maybe late 80s, early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
But when I got in, we were still shipping cassettes and 45s to radio stations.
Wow.
There were no CDs.
Right.
So I guess I can say I was in the industry before CDs. So I pretty much worked my way up from there. I learned about shipping. So I dealt with all the trucking companies that would come and pick up, all the product.
Mm-hmm.
And then I worked in the mailroom, which we call the promo cage. And that's where everything kind of exploded for me.
Yeah.
During that time, where I was able to link in with a lot of the record reps that would come in the back and get their product.
Right.
So these guys were, settled in age. So they didn't go to the clubs. So they was like, yo, take this box of 12 inches and go around all the clubs and make sure that the DJs have records. This was pre-Street Team,
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. So by me working for one of the largest companies back then, we had Big Daddy Kane, we had Biz Markie, we had Ice-T, they did a deal with Luke. So we had a lot of rap, MC Light,
Mm-hmm.
Audio, I forgot the name of the group, but there were a lot of rap records coming through the system.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys did not go to the clubs. So I took it upon myself. I would go to all the clubs and I would just service them. And that just kind of got my name out there, and a lot of people got to know who I was, and I just kind of became this guy that was servicing the DJs.
Right.
It wasn't a title, it wasn't Street Team, it was just, hey, I would just do this every Friday, every Thursday through Saturday. I would just hit the clubs and passing out, doing promotions, doing all this stuff. And this was back in the late 80s, 87, 88, all the way up till I took my first promotion job in 91. That's what I was doing here in Atlanta.
So why was servicing records to colleges and radio stations an important part of your journey in the industry? Like, what do you think that taught you to, how you can correlate that experience to now what you're doing?
It was the thrill for me was being able to give somebody something that they had never heard of and then watch them respond to it and play it for a mass amount of people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, back then we had Georgia State, their radio station. Georgia Tech had a radio show that they played a lot of hip hop and new stuff on. So those were my guys, and I could go to them and give them new music that they wasn't getting from anywhere else.
Right.
And of course, with the DJs and then working with the record pools as well. $1 Million Record Pool was like the largest, record pool back then, and they had DJs all over the city. So we all had, developed relationships with those guys. So it was relationship based.
Right.
That I liked. It was knowing the fact that I could take a record and give it to a guy, and they would play it, and they would respect my ears, and I would respect their ears.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't about, hey man, give me X amount of dollars to play this record. It was the love of the music, and we shared the music. And if a DJ got a record before anybody else, it was cool, because back then V103, they wasn't playing rap.
Right.
So the college stations were killing it. It was all college and the clubs that was, killing, early hip hop.
Yeah.
So so that was, that was the thing. I'm sorry,
No, it's okay.
that's the hazard of being a record rep. Everybody's calling.
It's okay. We just gonna politely just
Yeah.
hit the side
Hit
for
the
you.
side button.
But I think that's you hear a lot about industry vets who started in the mailroom and kind of worked your way up, and you have been around for almost 3 decades within this music industry thing, the music business, and you've explored or been able to work with a lot of different artists, a wide range of artists, not just like hip hop or you have worked with a lot of R&B artists, particularly some that I noticed of course, like Atlanta's T.I. You work with Snoop Dogg, Al Green, and even Diddy, doing some promotion and strategic marketing, right? So specifically, why do you think your skill set granted you the opportunity to work with such a wide range of artists? Obviously, you've been at different companies, but why do you think it's something about your skill set that allowed you to work with all these artists?
One, in this business, you have to be a people person. That's like number one. I was taught from an early age in this business, hey, if you want to make it in this business, you have to be a people person.
Yeah.
Very important. And I think a lot of times people forget that.
That's true.
They go on the music and they go on, all these other things that they do. But at the end of the day, this is about relationships. This business is built on relationships. I have not been around for 30 plus years just based on me doing what I do.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, you have to be good at this. You have to be a good communicator. You have to know your product. You have to know the artist. You have to even know the companies, the the radio stations and the personnels and everybody that you're dealing with. You have to be able to adapt to different attitudes because, hey, I can call you today and you're bubbly and you're happy, and I might call you tomorrow and you're like,
it's not today.
not today.
Yeah.
But you have to know who you're dealing with. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to, if you're in a foul mood, I'm not talking to you about my record.
Right.
It's like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Hey, man, I'm not in the mood today. Cool. No problem, bro. We'll talk about it at another time. Hope everything's okay. Click, I'm gone.
Right.
And, and people have a respect for that because it's not like, think that they're just, hey, let me just go get my records played, and then not care about that person.
Exactly.
And people, they appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
They appreciate, just blowing a call in and saying, hey, man, dude, I'm just calling to see what's up, man. I wasn't even calling to ask you about playing no records today. What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, cool. Or if I'm flying into a market, hey, let's get the business taken care of while we're on the phone. So when I get there, we can just chop it up about some other stuff, talk about what you guys have got going on versus me beating you up before we go eat about records.
Exactly.
And then on the flip side of that, they'll ask you, so this is what I'm doing with your record. So you have to be able to know that person and be able and build those relationships to know the type of conversations that you're having with these guys.
So I think that's interesting that you say that. One of the artists, actually, in particular, that I'm interested personally in hearing your experience working with is Benita Baker. She's such a talented artist, and she's the cause of many classic marching band ballads for me. So I just wanted to know what your experience was working with her, and in what capacity were you able to elevate her career, if any?
This one is different because I never personally met her.
Oh, really?
Now you got to understand, sometimes we'll work a record and we will never have an interaction with that artist.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So I've worked with her back in the early 90s, and I never met her.
Oh, wow.
Even to the last project that we worked at Capitol, I worked with her at Elektra also.
Yeah.
When she was there. And then I worked with her when she had a record on Blue Note here at Capitol. And I've never physically been introduced to her. Now I have been when I was before I became a promotions person, I was in the same room with her, but I was a rookie. I was green. I wouldn't even go up to the woman.
Right.
But I saw how she moved around the room and how people reacted to her. But yeah, I mean,
It wasn't. Okay,
yeah.
that was just one that I saw on
Yeah.
on the list
Yeah.
of artists that you work with that resonated with me. But so you're a vet, obviously, and we've been talking about your time within the music business, but you're still very current and you remain very relevant, working on a lot of hot projects today. What are some of the things that you're currently working on, or some of the artists that you're currently working with?
Right now, we just dropped a new Rich Homie Quan record. He's now signed with Motown.
Okay.
So we just dropped a new record with him. We have a new record coming with, it's already out, Lil Yachty and the Migos.
The Peekaboo song?
The Peekaboo record, which is through QC.
Yes,
Motown.
I do like that one.
Yep. So we have that. Of course, the Mary J record, the new Strength of a Woman project. Kevin Ross, who's an incredible R&B artist.
Okay.
We getting ready to launch a new single on him. Gregory Porter, who has a record with Layla Hathaway, who's an incredible jazz performer, just won another Grammy this year.
Awesome.
So, so we have a lot of developing stuff that's also being, that's coming down the pipe. But love it.
Do you find yourself kind of doing things outside of your job? In terms of like, you going to the radio stations, you're promoting these records, are you doing other things with the artists outside of your job? I did see something about you managing a bit as well.
I do a lot of consulting with people. Everybody is always asking me for advice. How do I do this? How do I do that? And you have to, you want to share the knowledge. And that's what it's about. It's about sharing the knowledge. Because I know a lot of guys didn't come up the way that I did, and they don't have the experience that I have. So try to save them from doing all the crazy stuff or jumping through the hoops and not getting a result out of it. I consult. I tell them, hey man, you might want to do it this way versus that way. So a lot of them, sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't, but they always come back.
Right.
And tell me what the results are, or I see them.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I can just tell you what the outcome is going to be if you continue to go in that direction.
That's true. So we talked a little bit about how you started in the cassette tape days, and now how things have obviously changed. Now we have streaming and just different options. People are not necessarily buying physical copies. But how could you say that today's artists have changed? Like you working with the Rich Homie Quans versus working with T.I. back in, trap music days?
I think just the technology, the awareness of how they put out music, versus the CDs back then. Now it's all about streaming, and that's what a lot of these kids are into. It's all about getting the product out as fast as you can, and, not having to go through that process of mixing and mastering and looking at the artwork and doing all those things and liner notes, and they're not into that. The era where I come from, we love looking at the artwork and reading the liner notes and who wrote the record, who produced the record, who engineered the record. We wanted to know all of that. Kids these days, they don't care.
They just want to hear it.
They just want to hear the music. If it's hot, it's hot. If it ain't, then they keep it moving.
Yeah. Well, how has that process affected you, though? Like being able or having to market these records back to back, I'm sure, because we're so used to hearing something and then going straight to the next thing. Like, how has that affected you in terms of marketing these records?
Well, in terms of marketing the records, we have to be very proactive in terms of how we service the records and get the records out to the consumers.
That's true.
Radio moves a certain way. A lot of times records have already been out in the marketplace, whether it's on SoundCloud or any of these other social sites that these kids get music on. So a lot of times, especially if it's a record that we pick up and it's already been out there, kids are probably like, man, I'm on to the next one. I'm finished with that. Well, we're probably just getting started at radio with the record.
Yeah.
So it's all about that exposure, taking it to the next level. Granted, yeah, the record has been out. It's had 300 million streams or whatever you want to, however they've been listening and all this stuff that's been going on. But when we get the record, it's another level. It really it validates all that stuff that's been going on. Now the record is in the system. It's at a major label. Now we're getting ready to put this major push behind it. The foundation has been laid. That's great that the record has 3 million, likes and views and listens and all that stuff. So that builds a foundation. So when we take the record to radio, we can take all that information that we have and share it with radio. So you got to know your product. You got to know what you're dealing with. Hey man, I got a record that's got already got, the video has already got 3 million views, and you telling me that you can't get this record an opportunity? Right. 3 million people have already said that they like the record. The video, whatever the case may be. So we have to plead that case to radio.
Kind of makes the claim a little bit better.
Yeah, you got to have that foundation.
You mentioned having a record in the system a lot. What do you mean by what system are you speaking of when you say that?
The system?
Yes. What system is that?
Wouldn't you? I'd like to know. No, I mean, when I say the system, I mean, from me working at a major record company my entire career, there are systems. Back then we had distribution, we had branches, where we would have marketing departments, and we had the distribution of salespeople, all of that. Just seeing the record come from the plant into the warehouse, from the warehouse to the radio stations to retail, all of that. Now the system has changed. It's not so much physical. You get the record, you put it in the system in terms of where, digital world that it's going to live in. We take the record, we take it to radio. So, there's that process
right.
that the record goes through before it actually hits the consumer.
Right.
So
I always see you out either here at Patchwerk in the studio or just at events around the city. Why is it important for you to remain active, I guess more so on the social scene, doing what you do in this business?
I mean, you got to stay connected to what's going on. I'm not out that much, but when I get out, I like to go to events and do things that are impactful. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So can't be everywhere because I do a lot of stuff, and this is a very demanding job at the end of the day. So, but you have to still be in the loop and know what's going on.
Right.
I've always liked being in the field. In terms of hearing, finding new music, keeping in contact with as many people as possible to know what's going on. And that's the only way you're going to be able to stay relevant in the business. You can't be out of the loop and still think that you're in the know what's going on, because the business it changed so fast.
Right.
You think about the guys that were in the business when I was in, they're no longer here. So for them to try to jump into this business now, they got to retrain themselves because it's not the same way. But one thing that I will say that will always remain the same, and I talked about this earlier, is building relationships. That would never change. I don't care what you do, how long you've been in the business, how short of a time you've been in the business. It always gets back to those relationships. It's very, very, very key. And I tell a lot of these young guys who are coming in, like, yo, you might be hot now, but you're going to get cold. And if you don't have relationships, then, on to the next one.
It's true. It's just very true. So you work for a major label, Capitol, or Capitol Records. And we hear how people, obviously independent labels, you could do it that way. But there are some things that people say that major labels can do for you that indie labels might not be able to do, or being a part of an indie or independent artist you might not be able to do. Pinpoint a few things that you think a major label is capable of doing for an artist versus them remaining independent.
Professional staff, people that are dedicated to doing this every day, whether it be promotions, whether it be marketing, whether it be sales. This is something that we do every day. You got to understand, we provide a service for the artist. And if you don't have those type of people working on your behalf, then what are you doing? You're just wasting your money. You know, so you can look at a different situations in terms of independent artists that have been successful. But I guarantee you, 100%, they had someone that had major record company experience driving their product. Whether it be marketing, whether it be video, whether it be radio, they've all worked for a major record company. You got to understand something. The industry has shrunk. There's only 3 major record company groups out there. You have Universal, you have Sony, BMG, and then you have the Warner Group. That's it.
Wow.
Now, there are a lot of labels up under that, but a lot of these labels used to be independently owned. Virgin Records was an independent label. Interscope was an independent label. Motown was an independent label, you know. So what has happened over the years with the consolidation of these record companies, it has left the market wide open for independent companies to thrive and be successful.
Right.
You know? So you look at like a Chance the Rapper, who everybody was throwing money at him. You look at Tech Nine, who has a distribution situation with Universal, but he's independent.
Right.
So you have to know how to work the system and what works best for you. But if you don't have the knowledge of the game and somebody that has the knowledge, then you're just going to be flapping in the wind.
Exactly.
And wasting your money. You want to go spend $100,000 on videos and do all this stuff, but then you hadn't put together a strategic plan. You don't have a radio budget set aside. You don't have a marketing budget set aside. You don't know anybody to help you set up a promo tour or to go around to the various markets and to introduce your artists. All this stuff is done by us, you know, and people who have that experience, you know?
Yeah. Why do you think it is that, or for you, you've been working with, I guess, major companies your entire career. A lot of times you see people kind of branch off and do their own thing. What has kept you with a label, or what's kept you with a company like Capitol Records?
I want to say stability, but there is no stability in the record industry. Nobody retires and get the gold watch. You know what I'm saying? You're only as good as your last gig.
That's true.
So I'm just blessed to still be here, doing what I do. And of course, I'm always working on other things, you know, but at the same time, this is what pays the bills. This is what I love doing each and every day. And then when it's time for me to leave, then, you know, I'll leave. Or they'll push me out, but I'd rather leave on my own.
On your own terms.
And it's just the hazard of being in this business. I mean, I was just talking to some people this morning about, you know, when people are out of when they're no longer working for a record company, how it has a major effect on them, because now you don't have the corporate card, you don't have that major label or title behind you. I don't, you know, and that's one reason I don't carry business cards. I haven't carried business cards in like 7 years.
Why is that?
Because I just never wanted people to identify me as the dude at the record company.
Right.
I'm Ric Ross. Bottom line, I work for this company, but that's not my identity.
That's true.
And we have to understand this. You know, we're in the entertainment industry. This is not real. This is not the real world to the average person. The average person looks at my life and be like, wow, man, you just hanging around all these stars, you get to travel, you get to do this. But at the end of the day, it's business, you know. I get up at 6 or 7 o'clock every morning, do reports. People say, you in the record industry, you reports. Like, this is a business, and we have to treat it as such. Just like any other business, there are layoffs, there are cutbacks, people get fired. It still happens. But what keeps me in the business is the love for the music. That's my driving force. So, you know, I continue to do this until I can't do it anymore.
That's amazing. Aside from your professional career, actually, I had the opportunity to work with you and your nonprofit. Could you tell us more about what Music Education Group, or MEG, does, and what you're doing for the community? Your community. You're from Atlanta.
Yeah, born and raised in the ATL.
Yes.
This is my legacy. This is what, when I leave this side of the business, this is what I want to do, is continue to run this nonprofit, which I started about 16 years ago. I was out of the business for 2 years, and I was just sitting around. And I've always worked with kids, whether it be at the Boys and Girls Club or summer jobs. When I was in high school, I've always had a passion for working with young people. So God gave me this vision to start MEG, Music Education Group. And our focus really is to teach kids about the business side of the industry. We've also expanded that into technology and film. But our strong focus is really self-development, making sure that kids really understand who they are. We use the music as a vehicle. And we've been very successful. We work with the City of Atlanta Parks and Recs at one of their community centers, Dunbar Rec Center over in Mechanicsville. We've been there going on 4 years. Got a lot of exciting stuff going on with them. We also work with Best Academy, which is the all-boys school. I partner with Ku Carell, the Ku Carell Foundation, and the 100 Black Men's, and we have a program over there, what we call the Music Pod, where we go in once every other month and we have about 10 students in this program, and we talk to them about the industry, but also, life skills as well. So this is my second year of doing this program, but I've been working at the school for about 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so now, of course, the school is getting ready to move into another building with the all-girls school, Coretta Scott. So doing changes with that, and then, of course, we partner with SAE Institute and AIM. So we have a lot of different partners that we partner with. My good friend, Curtis, is one of our partners as well. So,
awesome.
So we really invite the industry to be a part of this and to give back to the community. It's a couple of, kids either want to play sports or they want to be in the entertainment industry. Our goal is not to encourage either one. If that's what they want to do, that's fine, but we want to give you the tools if that's something that you want to pursue.
Right.
But just teaching you business etiquette, whether you want to be an attorney, whether you want to go work for Coca-Cola, whatever you want to do, giving you that foundation and the knowledge of how to approach any of those businesses that are careers that they want to engage in. So it's been very, very rewarding.
Yeah.
Of course, every year we do our toy drive.
It was very successful.
Yeah, it's very successful. This would be, well, we just did one this year, be our fourth one, and we service about 500 kids every year. So it's rewarding.
Yeah.
It's stress-free, drama-free.
Right.
And I don't have to deal with no artists. I don't have to deal with no entourages. And I did all that, But, I said, you know what, I want to take the focus off of that and put the focus on the kids. So I don't really have artists involved with it anymore because, I just wanted it to really be focused on giving back and making sure that the kids have a good time doing those events.
I can imagine how rewarding that does feel to, give back to the community. I'm very much so into doing that myself. I think you mentioned that it's significant to you to leave that legacy behind, but why create your own nonprofit? Why do you think, there's so many things that we can get involved in the community, but you set aside 16 years ago to create your own nonprofit specifically for these students. Why was that so important to you?
Because it wasn't being done. Nobody was doing it, and still to this day, nobody is really feeding the kids like that. There's a lot of great programs out there, but and don't get me wrong, it's cool when an artist starts a foundation and they can go and give out turkeys and bikes on Christmas, but there are things that are going on each and every day. Exactly. That these kids need focus, they need attention, they need someone to to pour into them. Not just not just going out and give them a turkey and saying, hey, is that for you or is that for the community? Right. Is it for show? Yeah. And I know personally who it's for. So I said, you know what? I don't want to be a part of that. I spend most of my time, making sure that this program is thriving, and I don't get paid from this. I do it out because this is something that I'm passionate about, something that I've always wanted to do. And it got to a point, 4 years ago, I was like, you know what, I can't do this by myself anymore. So I hired an executive director to come in and run day to day. But my hands are on this thing every day, and I'm getting training. We have a partnership. We were awarded a grant with the Georgia Center nonprofit and the Arthur Blanks Foundation, which is called the West Side Momentum, which they were going in to revitalize the Vine City, English Avenue, Donley Holloway, that Castleberry, that old corridor in front of the new Georgia Dome. And we've been part of that initiative for 3 years. Unfortunately, it started off with about 40 plus nonprofits. Now, they might average at a meeting maybe 20, 15 people that come. And it's about just getting the knowledge on how to be a better organization. And who wouldn't want to do that? Who wouldn't want to be better? Getting this free information, this free training. Was part of the United Way VIP program. So I'm board trained to serve on any board, any nonprofit board, whether it be from the largest to the smallest.
That's awesome.
So I was proud to be a part of that initiative and do that training. So, I wanted to be a better founder,
right?
Of running this organization versus just starting it and then saying, hey, this is what I do. But we do this for real. Yeah,
very hands-on. I love it.
Very hands-on.
So I think some people just get it when it comes to the music business. Do you feel like you have some sort of innate sense when handling marketing and promotions and things you do on a daily, or do you think these skills were taught or learned for you?
Both. Yeah, because you have to have mentors in this business. This is a different business than you don't. Back when I started, I don't know now because I know a lot of people are going to school for different things. But when I started, there were no books on how to be a promotion man. I had to watch. I had to observe. I had to go on the road. I had to spend a lot of time with promotion people to find out exactly what are you doing? Like, how do you get this guy to play your record? Like, what is that? What's the magic behind that?
Right.
So I had to learn that. I had to go out and see for myself. And then when I took my first promotion job in '91 and moving from Atlanta to Charlotte, I had to go out and apply all those things that I learned, and I became, very successful at it. But it's still a work in progress because people's attitudes change from day to day. So you have to be able to adjust. I talk to over 40, 50 radio stations in a given week, and everybody has a different attitude. So you have to know how to deal with that person each and every day. You don't know who you're going to get on the other end of that phone.
That's true.
When you call.
Yeah.
So you have to be the person to take the lead in the conversation and making sure that you get what you need to get at the end of the conversation.
Mm-hmm. What's one thing that makes you wake up every morning excited each day to continue doing what you're doing?
My love for God. I mean, who's the head of my life? I'm a born again. I'm a Christian. I'm also a deacon at my church.
All right, deacon.
So,
Deacon Ross.
I get up every morning. Praising God. I mean, that's what it is.
That's true.
And I'm not ashamed of who I am as a Christian being in this business. And I talk about it. I send out a daily inspiration every day to about 300 plus people every day.
Add me to the mailing list.
I'll add you.
Please.
But that's what's important to me and my wife. My family, I've been married 25 years this month.
Wow, congrats.
And I'm a very family-oriented person. I don't, like I said, I do this for a living. This is what I do and this is what I love, but it's not who I am.
That's true.
And that's what we have to keep we have to keep that in mind as we move about, because a lot of people get lost in this business.
Mm-hmm.
And once it's no longer there for them, they don't know what to do. And it's A lot of people commit suicide. A lot of people go to drinking and drugs and all that stuff because those corporate cards are not there. The phone calls are not coming in. You're not hanging out with the celebrities. You're not in the, you're not invited to the big parties and all this stuff. And then, once that stops, a lot of people can't handle that.
Yeah.
You know, I tell it like this: we're the closest thing to a star because we're with them and we make them. You know, I call myself a star maker because we build careers. It's not left up to us to what's on the other end of that. It's not our responsibility. It's on the responsibility of that artist.
Mm-hmm.
But we put them in great situations to become very successful in this business. Some, know how to handle it and some don't. On both sides, whether you're an artist or whether you're on the record side.
So I think there's some elements of the business that you might have. Obviously, we talked about the changes in the music business, but are there some elements of the business in which you wish it still existed or wish that execs and artists still implemented today?
I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. I wish we could develop real relationships again, where we could really hang out. There used to be conventions. Jack the Rapper was like the best convention that everybody came and hung out. You could be walking down the hall and run into Michael Jackson or, back then MC Hammer or Teddy Riley and just like I ran into Eddie Kendricks getting off an elevator from the Temptations.
What?
Literally ran into him, looked up and he was right there. So those type of experiences that a lot of guys don't get to have these days when you have everybody that's hot in one hotel going to these different shows and receptions and listening parties, all this stuff happening in one hotel over a course of 3 or 4 days. That's not happening anymore, and that's what's missing from the business is those type of events where you can get outside of the radio station, get outside of the record company, and just come, hang out, have a drink, go play golf, go play cards, whatever the case may be, and just hang out. That's not happening anymore. So I think that's really a big part of the industry that's missing.
Yeah. How you talked about your nonprofit and you also have your family, your wife. How do you balance it all? Like, how do you make time for the other things that are just as important to you as the music?
Prioritize. It's all about structuring. Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
That's
simple
it.
As that.
It's simple. For me it is. Because I've always worked out of my house.
Okay.
So I had to have structure. I had to know when to get up in the morning. We don't have people standing over us telling us what to do. So I had to know when to get up. I used to work 7 days a week. I used to work on Sunday. I would start work at 10 o'clock on Sunday night. I had to put a sign on the door that said this was my office and close it because I was working so much. And I did that straight for 15 years.
Wow.
Like, it was nothing but entertainment. It was nothing but radio and records. 15 years straight. And then my first layoff, that was the first time I didn't have anything to do. And I was sitting around like, I'm normal. Like, literally. So I had to start hanging out with people who had other jobs than me. Because I would sit around and we would all sit around and have dinner, and it would always lead into talking about the industry. So, when I got saved, I started hanging out with my church folks.
Come on, Deacon.
They didn't know. Didn't know.
I'm going to stop.
It's all good. That's what it is.
I love it.
They didn't know what I did.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
They weren't interested in talking about it.
Of course they were, but, it was like, this is what I do. It's not who I am. I'm more interested in what you do versus what I do. So I started hanging around people who did other things. So that brought balance, to my life. So it's like I live for the weekend because I spend time with my family and with my friends. And when I'm not on the road, we're just hanging around having fun, doing dumb stuff. And I'm pretty much a boring person anyway, so I just like watching TV. So, that's how I bring balance to my life.
Good. My last question before I let you go, because I know I've been picking your brain all morning. What are some other endeavors that you see yourself getting into? You said you like TV. We're in Atlanta. It's a huge TV and film industry. I just don't believe that you're only working on this. Is there anything else that you have in mind for the future?
We working.
We working?
We working.
That's all you're going to... You're not going to give me too much more?
We working.
It's okay. I'll get it out of you one day.
We working.
I appreciate that. Well, much success to the records that you are pushing now and what you're doing over at Capitol. Also just to you and your family. Where can they find more about what you're working on? Are you on social media active there?
I'm on, but I'm not active. I am on. Say that. Yeah, I'm on, but I'm not active. Really my organization, really, Music Education Group, is, we're always looking for volunteers. We're always looking for, donations. So
how can they volunteer or donate?
You can go to themed.org is the website, and fill out all the information on there. If anybody wants to get at us, they can go there. So it's THEMEG.org.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, we're here with the real Ric Ross.
Yep.
The real Ric Ross. It was good talking to you.
Thank you.
And if they do want to follow you, even though you're not active, where are you on social media?
I'm on Facebook and IG. Yeah.
Okay. Ric Ross.
Ric Ross.
RICROSS.
Yeah, I think on IG, I think I'm Rick the Runner, because I'm a runner. I run marathons. So
oh, do you?
I think I'm, I think that's my IG.
Okay, cool.
Rick the Runner.
Awesome. All right. It was good talking to you, Rick.
Thank you.
And as always, you can find these podcasts and continue to tune in. I'm Sammy approved on all social media platforms. I'll talk to y'all soon.
Am I approved?
You are approved, Rick.
Sonically superior.